I'm glad you were also bobbing your head to the music. I do appreciate that. Welcome to Self-Publishing Insiders, brought to you by D2D Live. I'm Lexi Green, and I manage social media at Draft Digital, and I'll be your host this week for a pre-recorded episode. I am thrilled to have a chance to introduce and have a conversation with Aaron Renfroe.
Hey guys.
Uh, Aaron, I wanted to just kind of get your bio in order, and then we will kind of move into the conversation. But Aaron is an author and the owner and operator of Pivot Press. Pivot Press is an organization built to optimize publishing books and audio in the lit RPG genre with as much quality and as quickly as possible. And you really committed to that mission, I will say, just as a fan and someone who's been part of your community. You put in the work.
It's the only way to do it, right? It's the only way to do it in the current industry.
Yeah, and that's true. And I think that you've kind of created a good sustainable model for yourself. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. First of all, thank you, by the way, for setting aside some time to have a conversation with me.
I'm happy to.
Yeah. So let's get into kind of your background before we jump into the conversation today, which is going to be a little bit about kind of the genre you work in, lit RPG, and it's going to be a lot about building a team around yourself and the collaborators that you work with in your career. But to start with you, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So technically, I published my very first flop, I think around 8 or 9 years ago now. I had no idea what I was doing. I just put a book together and threw it out. My background is in writing. Like many people, I started writing online on forums, ERP, chat RP, right? All the fun stuff. You read a whole bunch of books and you want to play it out. You want to play D&D at the tabletop. And I cut my teeth in writing with people, and then I got my degree in English. So that's kind of where my background comes in.
That's interesting. Like, so I as someone who also has like forum RP experience, it is interesting how like building out these characters like kind of encourages you to go, like there's like 7 more steps between doing this and just writing my own story. And eventually I think that like that bug gets harder to ignore. Um,
I think that one thing I've seen nurturing new authors repeatedly is that you have to have written enough that you're confident of your prose. And once your prose is out of the way, once you're no longer worried about whether or not you know how to say something correctly and at the correct cadence, then everything else is just execution.
Yeah, I think that is the case. Like, you just have to, once you look at your writing and I think, oh, everything I write is actually awful and structured poorly. Like, then you can start to really build upon yourself as an author. Now, like, at what point did you take this, like, just love of writing, like this hobby that you've kind of been doing for most of your life, and like, when did you decide to move into making this a career? What did making that commitment look like for you?
So, bit of a Debbie Downer story. The beginning of COVID, my partner and I had a daughter, and my partner became sick with an uncurable disease, and that cost her job. And as a single income parent with with medical bills racking up, I had no choice but to write. And as it turned out, it was it was a Hail Mary, right? So my first book did unexpectedly well. And because I had peers in the industry who were willing to mentor me, I knew a bit about market pressure and market trends. And I basically said, look, to take this opportunity that I have generated with one moderately successful book and turn it into continuous income, I have to do X, Y, and Z. So for the last 3.5 years, 4 years, I have just done XYZ repeatedly.
Interesting. So you really took like the lessons you learned from other authors, decided like this is like I need to find like a way to succeed in this, created a structure, and you've just been sticking to it for years now.
Correct. I mean, the thing is there's a scale of, right, there's this theoretical published author on one side, and then there's the indie author, working author on the other. And if your dream is to be traditionally published and to write one book a year or one book every 2 years and make enough money to survive, I would argue that dream is almost over. It's almost impossible now. But as an indie author, if you're willing to do some navel gazing and say, okay, how do I write in a way that produces the income that I need to survive? Then you can move down the other spectrum and produce the work that you enjoy, but quite frankly, keeps a roof over your family, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that is certainly the goal. And I think you bring up a good point that, especially in the trad space, as they move to putting more of their focus on like the handful of bestsellers that they know are going to sell, like there's less chances necessarily being taken in that market and less space for new authors to break in. And I think that it's cool that you've kind of used this like the indie route to build this career for yourself. And you started as a self-published author, correct? Like so that like everything that you've kind of built from here has been from the venture of self-publishing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, long ago, I did put some inquiries in and try to get traditionally published, but um, when the opportunity was there, I honestly didn't think I was good enough, right? I didn't understand the industry well enough to understand how the social apparatus works and how the process works to get in the door. And I didn't understand the nepotism and all the other things, right? And this was years ago. And now, from what I understand, a lot of it's about social media following. It's not even right. They want to launch your book with 100 million people following you on social media, right? So the pathway to success for me has pretty much always been indie, even though I always dreamed of having the word penguin next to my name or whatever, or rock or Tor. It just wasn't the path that I could take.
Yeah, and I think that that is a big part of kind of embracing the indie identity is kind of dealing with the expectations we have when we romanticize being an author before you've become an author, where it's like, oh, well, being an author is about getting the big deal and like you said, having that penguin next to your name, and that's not the only way to find success in this industry. And I think like once you move past that feeling of needing that validation, that's where you could really start to cut your teeth and make indie authorship work for you.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to look down at indie authors for a variety of reasons. And one of my peers recently pointed this out that if you have, let's say, Kindle Unlimited, and you have access to all these books, you're going to read a certain percentage of them are going to be horribly written, poorly executed. They're going to, they're not going to be great, and that may sour you to the idea of an indie. But the thing is each indie author acts as their own publisher and has their own quality assurance, has their own editing process. So it really becomes about finding less the publisher and more the author or authors who produce the quality you want. So it you're not getting a curated experience like you would with a tour, right? But the opportunities to find diamonds are substantially higher.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big part of being an indie reader, especially is knowing, like, yes, when you lower the bar for entry for publishing, when you get rid of a lot of the gatekeeping, there are going to be books that come out that aren't going to be up to the standard you're looking for. But like, there are still books out there that are being written by talented authors, and written consistently, which is a thing I wanted to talk about real quick before we move on to other topics. You are uh, you've been very prolific since like I think you've really kicked off your career. Like I would argue that of the authors as part of your Pivot Press, on top of running Pivot Press, you are one of the most prolific authors in that organization. Like what is your process in terms of planning out your work, but also maintaining some form of life balance uh in your work path, so to speak.
So, um, wow, there's a big can of worms there. So first of all, right, my number one goal is to produce. Like I'm very much on that TISM spectrum, right? My number one goal is to produce what I need to produce so that I have the needs of my family and my friends and the people who work for me met. And if I don't produce words, then no one gets paid, right? So there's a point where you take the emotion out and you look at the logic and you say, I have to produce this number of words to produce this volume at this time, and then you just do it. I hate to say it, right? Like it's a scary thing to hear that you may have to do 5 or 10,000 words a day, and when people hear that, they're like, wow. But the process was, when I started writing, the process was to get myself to the point where I could write consistently 1,000 very, very quality words in an hour. Will they still need to be edited? Yes. But the point is to get that editing time as small as possible and get it as clean as possible in the first draft. If you can do 1,000 words in an hour, which sounds like a lot, but really isn't, then you can produce an 80,000 word novel in 80 hours, right? Minus editing, minus QA, minus all this other stuff, right? So you look at it from that perspective, right? So the goal is to produce X number of books in Y amount of time, and you just do it and you don't stop. If you need time off, right? You say, look, I need 80 hours to produce a book in 2 weeks, right? Or whatever amount of time. Then you say, okay, I've got weekends with my family. I put an hour or two a night aside for my child, for my spouse. I put an hour or two aside for chores. What, right? Like you really have to kind of micromanage your time, because if you don't, then it's easy to lose focus or lose rhythm.
I think the rhythm is a huge thing to mention there, and I feel like that amount of kind of practice and repetition, I think, is how you get to where you are. Like just having the goal, having the structure that you know you need to follow, and using that to kind of coordinate your whole agenda around. And I think you've been able to do that pretty effectively. Um,
There's a there's a thing. It's very like much like mental weight training, in that once you've written your first 70,000 word novel, it can feel very difficult. It can feel very daunting. And then when you push a little bit and you write your first 100 or 130,000 word, right? You learn a new rhythm, you learn a new cadence, both personally and in your writing. And then when you finally push out a 200,000 word novel in however much time you do, then the 100,000 words feels fast. The 70,000 words feels like a hummingbird, right? So you train it like a muscle, and you learn the cadences and rhythms, and then once you've polished that, it becomes easier.
you train it like a muscle is such a good way to put that. Like I think that just the um, getting like you said, the first book you write is going to be the hardest book you write, and I think that once you learn from that and once you develop that set of skills, then it's a skill set that you can continue to improve upon. Now, I did want to, before we jump into kind of talking about Pivot Press, I want to talk a little bit about lit RPGs because it's like I think it's a genre that, for one, I think is having like it's been having its moment for like I think the last couple of years. Quite frankly, like it's really popped off as a genre, but it's still a genre that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily going to be as familiar with because like it's kind of its own like niche within like I guess you would say fantasy or I guess fantasy sci-fi. So for viewers who might not be familiar with your genre, what makes lit RPG different from any other kind of like fantasy fiction sci-fi story?
Okay, so most people who listen to this are probably going to be familiar with Tolkien or Brandon Sanderson or Robert Jordan, right? So what I'll say is that you look at the framework of a story where the hero progresses from a point of weakness to strength. We call that progression fantasy, basically. Look at the story of Randall Thor in Wheel of Time. Look at most of Sanderson's stories, right? There's a progression. So we call progression fantasy a fantasy story where there's a clear delineation of upgrades and enhancements to the character throughout the story, right? And it can be systematized. You can have, he's a category C, he's a category S, right? These are gamified elements, but they're very light. They're present but light. LitRPG explicitly states the systematic rules of the universe in a way that the main character interacts with. And usually those systematized rules are as important and interactive as the character themselves. The most famous example of this is going to be Dungeon Crawler Carl right now, where the system literally talks to the main character or has dialogue with them and then presents them with rules. And attributes and power-ups and things like that, very much like a typical D&D character would get a character sheet, or it's any RPG game you might play on your computer, right?
Yeah.
So the LitRPG framework creates an opportunity that takes a lot of the cerebral load off of what you're doing. So I'll give you an example. So let's say I just wrote a book. It's called Apocalypse Breaker. The character got an ability where he can extrude crystalline growths from his body in the form of like weapons or whatever. In a progression fantasy, he would be able to do that, and then he would learn how to control that over a period of time, and then he would be able to make them longer or sharper or whatever. In LitRPG, he's going to get that, and then I'm going to give him a series of quests, and I'm going to say, here's how much damage this does, which is somewhat arbitrary, right? We do kind of quantify it. We do try to create physics, but here's the base damage. Here's what it does, right? Here's a paragraph of text telling you what it does. I put the rules in play, and then I say, okay, now I'm going to give you 75 quests, 13 quests, 10 quests, whatever. And every time you complete one of these, you're going to get a ding, and it's going to have this new upgrade. In LitRPG, I can get away with that. I can say, look, the system gave him this upgrade. Now his claws deal double damage against doors, right? In progression fantasy, if I just made that happen, it feels more hand wavy. If in traditional fantasy, it feels more hand wavy. So LitRPG is fantasy for people who want things to make sense.
I like the idea that like it's just so gamified. It's like, yeah, no, you can see the rules, you see how it works, it makes sense. I think that it sounds like this is a genre that scratches a similar part of the brain in where when you play video games, when you play D&D, and you get that feeling of your character hitting a point where they've just become stronger. Like you're watching them go from a character that had 3 skills and like 7 hit points to suddenly this gave them like 50% more hit points. This one gave them a skill that's completely going to change their build path. Like I think from what it sounds like this is a genre that really has been enabled by kind of RPGs, both tabletop and games, kind of coming to a mainstream, like becoming more common, and like becoming just like an experience that a lot of people understand, or at least a lot of people in this space understand.
When I was growing up, I was reading the fantasy of the late 80s, early 90s. I always wondered, why would the main character not mix white magic and red magic, or blue magic and black magic? Why was there no experimentation? Why was there no synergies? Why was there no this, that, or this? When you read a LitRPG, if you're the kind of person who really wants to kind of get their teeth into the mechanics of things, it's such fertile ground to theorize, or as an author to write things so that fans can go, wait, so the main character has this bloodline ability, and then he has this class ability, and what if he, like, how is that going to interact in the next scene, or is there going to be a potential for that in the next book or whatever? It creates tremendous concrete systematized potential. And then one thing we teach our authors in Pivot Press is, we treat it the same way you would kind of modern social media. You want to reward X number of pages, X number of chapters. You want an objective, X number of pages, X number of chapters, because the reader is going to get that gratification the same way they would from another medium.
Yeah. Okay. So the idea of just kind of hitting your milestones, hitting your benchmarks in the story is as much as important as it is in a game, giving your players or giving like a character a feeling where they're hitting their marks and they like there's a visible progression that they can feel good about. I think it's an interesting. I love the idea of just writing a story where you can kind of play with the rules a little more. It's still a very hard magic system. Like it sounds like our lit RPG is really built upon hard magic systems, but there is the wiggle room for you as an author to go like, yeah, okay, so we have these 2 systems, you have these different power-ups. What if they use them in an unconventional way? What does that do to the way that they're able to progress? I think you can get really interesting stories from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be fair, for those authors who are watching this who are considering going into LitRPG, any type of soft magic you introduce, you have to be very, very careful with, because audiences expect systems. right? If you you might have the inclination to say, okay, I'm going to have a LitRPG system and then I'm going to have a soft magic system, and you can do that. But the problem is when they interact and readers go into it expecting A and you give them C, that disconnect has a chance to divorce the readers from the experience. And in indie spaces and in niche genres, you don't want to defy audience expectations. The pain is too much for indies.
No, that's understandable, and I think like there's a potential where if you have your hard magic system and it's a system that there's rules and the audience has been following those rules, and you bring in a soft magic, you could get to a point where people feel like, oh, you're like cheating the magic system now, like you've introduced a thing that doesn't play by all the rules that we've learned and established. That definitely seems like a way to like turn off, like it's like writing romance where people are like, listen, if you're writing this flavor of romance, you do want to happily ever after. Like you don't like this is not the moment to subvert expectations. Your audience came for something. Make sure you're delivering on it.
Correct. Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Pivot Press, like, is it all lit RPG, or like, is there kind of a little bit of variance in terms of what your organization? Because, like, obviously, you start off as a self-published author, but you then proceed to kind of build out indie Pivot Press around yourself. So, like, what at this point is it mostly still lit RPG, or have you kind of, as a publisher, dabbled into other spaces?
Our rule is that it has to be high quality and include some either lit RPG or progression, right? It
Okay.
needs to fit within. So when an audience comes to get, like, as a publisher, what we want to be known for is a degree of polish, not perfection, a degree of polish, and connected universes or systems, so that when you get one of our books, okay, I'm going to pick up an Aaron book, an Aaron LitRPG book. It's going to be action, it's going to be adventure, it's going to have these types of systems. If you pick up a romance book, you're still going to have all that, but you're going to have some romance in it. If you pick up a horror version, exactly the same thing. So we want that to be kind of our core brand identity, um, just to maintain what's unique to us.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. I think that, like, as a publisher, if you have a brand, then it allows an author, it allows a reader to go, okay, this is like a different kind of like lens or a different kind of story that I would normally read, but it is still published by this company. It's still like going to have the elements that I'm used to. So that's a good way to kind of ensure. Like, I think that we often think in terms of like reader loyalty to authors, but like there are ways for, especially indie, like more niche indie publishers, do have that opportunity to build a loyalty to their reader base, where it's like, yeah, you can know what to expect when you come to Pivot Press.
I think that's the goal for me. Like, if you were to ask me what I was trying to do or my objective was with Pivot Press to stand out versus other publishing houses, it's specifically to, I'm not ambitious. We're not trying to grow rapidly. We will mentor new authors. We will work with new authors. But the ultimate goal is for when readers to pick up one of our books to know what they're getting into on across genres, right? So it's like, you know, otherwise, if you're just a publisher and everything goes out, then where's your brand, right? Like, the loyalty you create is not to your brand, it's still to that author. So I think the only approach as an indie publisher is to stick to my guns and say, look, we're not putting anything else out that the team doesn't believe in, that I don't believe in. And then if there are issues with it post launch because of the nature of the indie business, we go back and fix them, quite frankly.
That is, I love the flexibility of being an indie author, because like it does allow you that opportunity. It's like, I could go in, patch this up. Like, it turns out there are things that we could have still improved here, and let's do that. Now, what kind of like what was the journey of, like, you start off as an author? At what point? How did you get to the point where you were like, I can build this kind of organization around myself?
So it started out with when I built my first book. I knew that in modern publishing, that we as authors have to connect with our audience. We have to have opportunities for them to connect to us. It's not an option anymore. Um, and essentially, the process was I published my book, or I was working on my book, and I had Discord and other social media, and I was like, look, come talk to me about the book. We'll explore it together, right? Get your feedback. Oh no.
No, stay hydrated. I've been doing it while you talk, but you're yapping way more than me. So
Yeah, thank you. So I created a landing page for fans to come in and talk to me, and then the process of building the team and the building of Pivot Press is basically taking the people who gave me the best feedback, the most honest feedback, who were able to give it in a timely manner, and saying, look, you're adding real world value to my life and my time by helping me with my product. I'm going to pay you for that. And then those people over months moved in from an outer circle to an inner circle until I finally hired, they became permanent people on my staff, where it's like, look, you're a fan, cool. You can turn around 10 pages or 20 pages of feedback when I give it to you. You can say this works, this doesn't work, which is invaluable, right? Market research from my target audience. Let me compensate you for your time. Oh, you can also do some editing for me. Well, I'm going to bring in you, I'm going to bring in you, and I'm going to bring in you. And then I created a stacked team from fans. And, since that time, we have grown big enough that the team is sufficiently sized. But there we have, we use our Discord, we use our social media to grow the fan base and say, look, if you want to come in and do an alpha read of a book just to give us your gut feedback, here's $25 or here's a free book, right? The big difference between what I do and other indie publishers, a lot of them, not all, is I do pay. And I don't hire people to come in and do it. I pay existing fans who know my work.
yeah,
So
and I think that makes sense. Like especially when you've once you start to build your career and like you start to have people following you, like I assume I think we can both agree like there is a benefit to having consistent alpha and beta readers that are familiar with your work as opposed to just fishing for alphas and betas uh, in the wide open sea that is the internet.
yeah, I don't think that's possible. I see people all the time, indie authors post all the time, where do I get alphas and betas? How do I get feedback, right? A lot of them for LitRPG go to Royal Road, and you may or may not get feedback because Royal Road is so busy now. It's so inundated. Finding an audience there can be very difficult. Um, I think the only path is to nurture people who you trust and who trust you and you take care of them, right? Now, for those of you who are new to the genre, new to it, you're relatively starting out. I didn't pay a lot of money at first, right? Like I didn't start giving away everything that I was earning, but I did see my first 2 or 3 books as investments. Every dollar I got back, I put back into the business. And if I could take someone who was an enthusiastic reader and pay them some money so that they could set aside, so they could afford groceries, so they could set aside 2 hours to give me some comprehensive and very useful, the key is useful, feedback, then it was well worth it because that money would go right back into book 3 or book 4 or book 5.
Yeah, and
So
I think that having a relationship with your community really does give you that opportunity where like you do find out, okay, here are the readers who I think have good enough opinion, like have the kinds of opinions that could be helpful to me as beta readers. And then from there, okay, I think that this person has enough of a grasp of like my writing style, grammar in general, just like the keys of making a good book. I think this person could work well as like part of my editing team. Um,
and I think to take a small step back, I will talk about the
yeah,
process a little bit.
please.
So not everyone's expected to come in and be an editor. So we have an alpha, beta, and then copy process. So our alpha readers aren't expected to know any of the rules of English at all. I just need you to know the genre that you're passionate about, right? If it's LitRPG, LitRPG. If it's romance, romance. If it's horror, horror. I just need you to come in and say this works and this doesn't work in a timely fashion. The good news is that I have done this enough that my readers, my team very rarely says, restructure this entire part of your book. It's more like, okay, in this chapter, you have this happen. It caused me to have this reaction. And then we have a discussion about it. We'll have a debate and we'll say, okay, what if I tweak this? Or what if I change this? Or what if I change this? I dial it in for my core group. And then it passes to the beta readers. And the beta readers come in with clean eyes, with fresh eyes, and they go through it. And the beta readers aren't necessarily looking for changing big story elements, but they will have those discussions with me as well. So we sift the sand one more time. And by the time it gets to the copy editor and the line editing and all that needs to be done, the story is well locked. It's been reviewed. My Patreon subscribers have read it. My Discord people, my internal team have read it, right? So it's sanded down to where it's still me, but it doesn't have any points of disconnect for the reader.
It's like you said before, it's that polish that you're looking to have as like your identity at Pivot Press. Now you're obviously not the only author at Pivot Press. Like what was the process of like deciding to bring more authors into this organization, and how did you kind of bring in people that you thought that, like, I can trust them to create a product that will live up to what I want to do at Pivot?
Oh yeah. So the answer to that is I wrote enough that I earned a name in certain communities, and then I started reaching out to authors who I respected and followed, and I asked them to work with me or part of the team, and we came up with agreements, right? So we have a lot. You'll notice a lot of Pivot Press is collaborations, right? Somebody's name is on the top line, someone's name is on the bottom line, and a lot of it is we do our best to find authors who are going to bring value and awareness of our brand, and who we can give value back to. Because most publishers don't include editing or marketing in their services at all anymore, we bring these authors in and we say, look, come work with us. You can use our publishing service. We'll put a cover on for you. We now, as of the last month or 2 or 3, have an audio team. We'll record your book if it fits the model. And it's just adding those extra services that and then proving ourselves ahead of time that have enticed some bigger names in. For this audience, I don't know if your audience will know this, but so Sean Oswald is writing Apocalypse Breaker with me. Sean Oswald is one of the arguably top 5, top 8 LitRPG authors in the genre right now, consistently anyway. And he came in because he heard my story and he said, "Cool, I'm happy to come in and work with you at this rate, and I see what you're producing and I see how you produce it, and I believe in your product." Right. So another one on the romance side would be Michael Dalton, right? So we have some people who are in the top 5, top 10 of the indie industry that we go to and we approach and we say, look, I want to bring all this value to you. Would you be willing to contribute and partner with us for 1 series or 2 series or 3 series?
Yeah, no, I think it comes down once again to like building those relationships and building, like you said, a good name in an industry. Like I think that once you I think it's worth noting that like building the kind of team that you make, it's not like a start of your career, like author career type activity. You have to take time. Like it's an investment. I think a lot of authors want to and expect that like they're going to just hit the ground running and book 1 will be the immediate start of their empire. And for some authors that first book's going to pop off, but like that's not always going to be the case. And even if it is, like there's more to build. And I think that your philosophy of like, okay, these are the books that I'm using to invest in and build from, I think is a good way to start.
I could teach a class about the economics of writing, right? Like, but to talk about what you just mentioned a little bit, let's say you are a brand new author and you have a really strong book 1. Let's say you make $250,000 on your book 1. Statistically, your book 2 is going to make about 70 to 60% of what your book 1 does. Statistically, your book 3 is going to make a percentage of what your book 2 did, because that's what we call the funnel, right? Let's say that you produce at an average speed of 1 book every 6 to 8 months, right? Let's just say you're a relatively normal person. So you're going to make, $400,000 or $500,000 in a year, which sounds amazing. Statistically, most indie authors have 1 incredible hit series if they're very lucky, and every other series you're chasing the dragon, you're chasing that popularity because fans want more of the same. Right. And the nature of the funnel, the book 1 is always going to be your biggest hit, and you go down from there. The nature of the funnel of diminishing returns is very punishing. So if you quit your day job and suddenly that money diminishes every year, the reality is a big hits, you don't need one big hit. You need 2 to 3 big hits every year.
Yeah, and it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. Like be like this, you can't build a career off of one book. Like it's a thing that pretty much no authors do. So
Or in usually one series either. Right now, if you get a Dungeon Crawler Carl, if you get a big series, absolutely one can change your entire life. But if you're the average successful, not just average, if you're the average successful indie author, right, the demands are extremely higher, because like 99% of all authors don't make enough money to live happily, to live comfortably, right? There's 1% of us that are able to make enough income, that we're fortunate enough to be able to live from our writing. And the process to do that is either you have a huge hit or you treat it like a job.
yeah, and I think you've reached the point where this is clearly like a job. It's something that you do consistently. It's something that you've invested time and resources into. And I think what do you think having Pivot Press around you, like I that must be a big part of what enables you to be as consistent as you are, like having a team around you. Like how much weight does that take off of this like cycle that you have to go through to find the success, to have these people around you?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So, I brought in some of my friends. I brought in some alphas and betas early on. Tyler, John, shouts to you guys if you watch this. TJ, Ash, Ghost. I brought in a whole bunch of people who found me through coincidence and referrals, and they became the core of, Aaron, this sounds good, or Aaron, I don't know if I feel this right, or they're helping me edit, like line it. And, you forgot this +4 he got up in chapter 1, right? Those little things, right, help that level of polish, help find that level of polish fairly early on. And then eventually I got a fan came in, and she was really passionate, and we got to talking, and it turns out she was a former paralegal, and she would be okay being my personal assistant, and happened to know LitRPG. And let me tell you guys, once you're at the point in your career where you find the right person to be a personal assistant, hire them. So,
Life changing for your
life
schedule, for your career.
life changing. We got brought her on, and then we brought an audio producer on. Life changing. So, you talk about as an indie, scaling up, right? So as a solo author, I'm planning on my 8 to 12 hour days, right? I'm going to write my book. I'm going to do 3 or 4 or 5 edit passes myself, just to meet my standards. It's not putting this on anybody else out there. You may do 1 edit pass and throw your stuff out there. That's fine. But for me, I wanted a level of higher polish. And having a team, having my personal assistant who can go in and do a first pass, then have my team go through it, then have my audio person be able to come back and go through it. We're talking about doubling my ability to produce. And I learned all this from Brandon Sanderson, right? So Brandon Sanderson's approach is, anything that prevents him from writing has to go, right? I don't know how much he edits. I really don't. I know that he has an editing team. He has an alpha beta team. I know he'll do rewrites, obviously, but I don't know how much he actually edits anymore. But in my opinion, the mistake a lot of indies make is they don't build one of these, or they don't outsource one of these, or they don't find one of these, right? They don't find the publisher, the pivot press, or the whoever can do this for them. And it just kills your time.
Yeah, understandable. Like I think that just having people you trust, and I think that that's an important aspect of it too. Like it is not just finding people; it is finding the right people. And you've clearly taken the time. Like you said, you're not looking to like build pivot like really fast. You're not looking to like do explosive rampant growth for your company. Like you're looking to cherry pick the people that you want to work with, that are going to vibe with you. And especially you mentioned collaborative writing. Like obviously you do, like you and Pivot in general have done a lot of co-writing. Like a lot of your titles have like 2 authors working in tandem. Like what even is what does the process look like of deciding like, okay, I think we work well enough, like our writing styles gel, our work patterns work? Like, how do you establish what's a good co-writer relationship?
So I have an essay about this tucked away somewhere, but I'll give you the boilerplate, the high level. So the high level is if you're a newer writer, when you come into a collaborative relationship, you're going to do the majority of the work, right? If it's whatever it is, right? And we can talk about the different ways collaboration works, but if you're the junior writer, you're doing a lot of the work. If you're peers, then you negotiate, right? There's a strong negotiation. Um, what I did at the start of my career in terms of finding collabs, in terms of negotiating and nurturing collabs with our writers, is say, look, go find the person that you admire who's doing well in the genre, approach them and say, hey, look, I have an idea. Let's ideate this together. What's the process where we work on this together? I'm going to own the drafting. I'm going to own 80% of the drafting. I'm going to own 70% of the drafting. You're going to get whatever cut, right? 50% of the cut. All you have to do is an edit pass, advise me, mentor me, nurture me, whatever, however that works, right? And then you've got this really powerful synergy where you get a paid mentorship, basically. You're getting paid by the sales of your book, and your mentor is getting paid to mentor you. When it comes to a higher level collabs, so Sean Oswald's a huge name, much bigger than mine, but when it comes to a higher level collabs, it's really about brand awareness. It's about what Sean Oswald's getting out of it in terms of his publication cycle and keeping his name out there on the cadence that he needs it to. It's about what Pivot Press can bring to him and his brand, right? And then I'm also saying, okay, what can I gain from that? What can Pivot Press gain from that? How can we gain from that? And what can we contribute? So it becomes a higher level discussion. So I would say to anybody who's watching this, who's an indie, who's thinking about collabs, I would say before you get into the details of who's writing what chapter, who's writing what paragraph or whatever, look at it from a very business perspective, right? What am I giving to this relationship? Number one, what am I going to get from this relationship? Number two, and how are we both going to benefit mutually? And then have a contract around that, right? You got to have a contract around that.
Yeah, no, I think people do need to like. I think it's very easy for a lot of authors to not want to think about writing as business because like it is for so many people their passion, and like it feels almost icky to be like, okay, like we need to think of like the legal business side of things here. But it is important, like especially if you're looking for like kind of equity between partners, if you're looking for a situation where everyone's going to benefit, like it's important to be very clear with like what everyone gets out of this, what everyone's putting into this. Otherwise, that can create like a toxic relationship that doesn't work.
Knock on wood. I have had some collaborations that did not go ideally, but I've never had one that turned like truly toxic.
That
Um, and putting everything in writing protects everybody, right? So like, I'll use Sean for an example. We sat down and I said, okay, what can you contribute? What do you want to contribute? And we put it in writing. And then we said, okay, here's what I'm willing to do. And then, okay, cool. Here's what's fair in terms of compensation. Here's when compensation is going to happen. Here's who's going to compensate whom, right? Like, it's not about being not fun. It's about getting all of the serious stuff out of the way so that you can make room for the fun and you're not worried about the serious stuff at the other polar, at the opposite side of the writing process.
yeah, I mean, like with any relationship, like conversation or communication is an important part of making things work for everyone. I think if there's one thing to kind of take away from what creates these good relationships and these like this building a team that's going to work is I guess like the idea of symbiosis. Like your team is in a place where they're working with Pivot Press because they will benefit from that relationship in some way. Pivot Press is working with them because Pivot Press is getting the benefit from them in some way. And even when you work co-write with each other, everyone's getting something out of this. It's a relationship that's designed for everyone to benefit, as opposed to one person benefiting from the labor of someone else.
Yes. I mean, and it's a lot more fun, quite frankly. Writing, as everyone who is on this, who watches this will probably attest to, writing is a very lonely, isolated process, right? We sit down and we hallucinate for however many hours to reach our word count goal. We get up, we're sore, then we have to go do our real lives, right? Having people to interact with and talk to in a very, like, again, for me, a very controlled way, right? Like, I don't have to worry about several hundred fans interacting with me in a way that I don't know. I can't make sure that I'm I'm saying the right things, or I can ask the right questions, right? I have this really tight group that I write for and write with, and I say, okay, I'm gonna do this in the story, and they give me that feedback, and it becomes um, a little bit of an echo chamber, but it also becomes very safe for me to again create this environment where we're all working together to produce the best product.
Yeah, no, I think that like you bring up like the lonely nature of writing, and I think that that is something that can be tough for some authors. Obviously, some authors are introverts, and like that's kind of where their preference is. But even still, I think that it is important that we continue to treat publishing as a community. I think like you get a lot out of working with other people, or at least having these conversations with other people. And as someone who's be kind of blessed and very fortunate to like be in the community that you've built and seeing the people you surround yourself with. It is an astounding team at Pivot. They're all, everyone there has been wonderful, and like just some of the nicest, sweetest people that I've met online. So you've done an amazing job building the community around you, Aaron.
Well, it's what's really, like, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but
Yeah,
our brand is really split between the fantasy LitRPG and the men's romance brands, right? So we have both. Half of our team, half of our staff, as you know, is are women, right? Like, my personal assistant has all the authority in the world on Discord. My narration production person, Aria, she oversees that, also administrates. Ash is my chief copy editor. Ghost oversees the website. Like, our infrastructure is all women. So what's unique about us is you come into our Discord and you're greeted by a mixed group. It's not a boys club, even though you might think it would be, right? You're getting this diversity, and you're getting this inclusion, and we're very, very much like, okay, whatever your chocolate, whatever your flavor is, like, we have it for you. Go enjoy yourself, be civil, and enjoy yourself, right? And I think, to me, that's what's really unique and amazing about the team that we've built. It's diverse, it's inclusive, right? Like, it's a safe place to come have a conversation. We keep the negativity as much to any destructive negativity we keep, right? We keep out,
yeah.
because we're focused on what we do.
And I think that like that diversity, I think your community's better for it. And I think that like it making sure that you aren't just kind of insulating yourself in like one specific group that like, especially in your genre. I we are approaching the end. I don't want to dawdle on too long, but when Ghost invited me into your community, I as someone who's queer on the internet, I was like, oh, like this is like a fantasy space, like is this going to be chill? And she was like, oh no, yeah, no, Aaron would not make this space unchill for anyone. Like this is, you will be safe here. So thank you so much for continuing to build a safe, diverse, and welcoming community. I think it's a good thing for this publishing industry.
I
All right.
agree. I agree. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of boys club stuff going on, right? but fundamentally, right, some of my most passionate people, some of my passionate readers, are people who are non-binary, who are all not traditional, who are women, who are people of color, right? Like, I never want to exclude anyone, and to be honest, I look forward to the day where I can write books that are a little more inclusionary for a global audience, right? For those of you who are watching this, who are in the industry, and you look at the books and you're like, well, this reads just like cookie cutters and jam. I'm selling to the audience. I'm selling them what they buy. But, at the end of the day, if we can grow the community, if we can grow the passion enough, then we can start to include little bits that gradually expand the market, right? So that's not to say that, Pivot Press is ever going to be a LGBTQ brand,
Yeah.
but having inclusion, I think is super good.
Yeah, and it makes it more normalized, and it like you said, it creates it, even from a business perspective, it's creating more market opportunity where it's like you're widening your umbrella, you're diversifying your reader base. There's more readers you can appeal to. So
Yeah, and to be honest, there's some points where I'm not all business, and one of those points is,
yeah.
that I don't care. I want
Oh
people to be
no.
included, right? Like, come on
Of-
in, come on
No,
in.
of course. I'm just saying there's both a moral benefit and like it just makes sense. Like
Right.
quite frankly, it is a win-win on any front. But Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I have so many questions written, and once again, it's just so easy to get lost in these conversations. Jim says it every week, and then I host the show like once a month, and I'm like, oh no, he was being so for real about that. But no, yeah, I would like to thank our viewers, our listeners for joining us. Be sure to like, share. Sorry. This part is absolutely being cut out. Be sure to like, share the video with your author friends and communities. If this is your first time tuning in, please be sure to follow and subscribe for more conversations with industry insiders. And to see who's going to be our next guest and when we'll be going live next, be sure to visit d2dlive.com. And finally, if you're looking to start your journey as an indie author, or if you're just curious to see what D2D has to offer, sign up for a free account at draftedigital.com. Once again, Aaron, thank you so much for your time and for a wonderful conversation.
It was super pleasure. Hope you all have a good day.
Yeah. Now, please hang out backstage. For everyone else, enjoy a little ad read about D2D print. And as always, happy writing.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draftedigital.com.